I used to work night shifts at a small IT firm downtown. Nothing too fancy, just the regulars: server maintenance, data backups, and ensuring that everything stayed up and running while everyone else slept. The hours were long and uneventful, the kind of job that let my mind wander while my fingers typed away in the dim glow of multiple screens. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. One night, as the clock neared 3 a.m. and the silence of the office was only broken by the hum of machines, I found myself working through the older backup files. I had a habit of going through old data, cleaning out what wasn't necessary. It was a way to stay busy and avoid the overwhelming boredom of the night shift. That's when I saw it. A folder deep inside the archives, sitting innocuously in a backup labeled "Do Not Open, 2017. It was buried under layers of other files, untouched and ignored for years. No one had accessed it in over half a decade. For a moment, I hesitated. It was rare that anything labeled with such a warning was worth the curiosity. But something in me, something dark and primal, urged me to click. It was a mix of curiosity and boredom, an urge to break the monotony. I double-clicked the folder. Inside were hundreds of small .mp4 files, each barely a minute long. The file names were cryptic, just a series of numbers and letters that didn't seem to make any sense. The first few videos were mundane: static screens, blurry images, and what seemed to be random security footage from different locations. The kind of footage you might expect from a malfunctioning camera or an outdated security system. But then, I clicked on the fifth video. The moment it started, my breath caught in my throat. It showed my apartment. A grainy, black and white camera angle captured the familiar setting of my bedroom, the dim lighting casting long shadows across the walls. The worst part? It was footage of me asleep. I didn't recognize the angle at first. It was an odd, unfamiliar view from the corner of the room, but it was unmistakably my room. The sheets I had thrown off the night before, the books scattered on the nightstand. And there I was, lying motionless in bed, completely unaware that I was being watched. My heart pounded in my chest, and my fingers froze over the keyboard. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some glitch in the system. Maybe it was old footage from a different place, some weird error. But then I clicked the next video. It was worse. The video showed me in the shower. Same day, same angle. The timestamp showed 4:12 a.m. That was today. That was just a few hours ago. I stared at the screen in disbelief. The water, pouring over me as I stood under the showerhead, was accompanied by the same eerie graininess of the earlier footage. I had been alone in my apartment, the silence broken only by the sound of the water. No one should have been there. No one could have been there. My pulse quickened, my breath shallow. How could someone have captured this? How could they have watched me without my knowledge? The questions began to spiral in my mind, each one more terrifying than the last. The footage wasn't just random. It was targeted. As I sat there in the office, surrounded by the buzz of computer fans and the lower machines, I could feel a chill creep up my spine. The feeling of being watched gnawed at me. I clicked on another video, this time hoping it was just some weird coincidence, hoping that it would be something, anything, that would make sense of this. But it wasn't. The next video was even more personal. It was a shot of me in the kitchen, walking past the counter. Late in the night, the faint glow of the refrigerator light casting eerie shadows across the room. I could see myself, unaware of the camera, going about my routine. The timestamp showed 3:30 a.m., half an hour after the earlier footage. I was beginning to feel the walls close in around me. How was this happening? Who was behind this? And why was it happening to me? The more I watched, the more the unease gnawed at me. It wasn't just some technical error or a glitch. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone had deliberately placed these cameras. Someone had been watching me for days, maybe longer. As I sat there, staring at the flickering video, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. In the background, just barely visible, was a shadow. It was fleeting, almost indistinguishable from the dim lighting of the room. But it was there. A person. I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus. Could it be? Was there someone standing in the corner of my apartment that whole time? Was I being stalked without even realizing it? I couldn't shake the thought. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. I needed to stop. I needed to close the file, erase everything, and forget I'd ever opened it. But something in me, something that I couldn't quite understand, kept me glued to the screen. I clicked the next file. The next file started with the same static, the same grainy footage. For a moment, I thought I was just imagining things. The image on the screen was of the same dark corner of my apartment, the same eerie angle. But as I focused, I realized this one was different. The timestamp was earlier in the evening. The footage showed me sitting at my desk, typing away at my computer, the soft glow of the screen illuminating my face. I had been working on an assignment that night, probably around 9 p.m. It was mundane, the kind of footage that seemed completely harmless at first glance. But then I saw something that made my stomach twist. The shadow was back. It wasn't as faint this time. It was more defined. A dark figure stood just outside the frame, its shape barely visible, but it was undeniably there. The figure stood still, motionless, watching me. I froze. The room around me felt suffocating. I didn't move a muscle, my eyes glued to the screen. There was someone in my apartment, someone who had been watching me for hours, maybe even days. They were standing right behind me, invisible to me, lurking in the shadows, but clear as day on the footage. I leaned in closer to the screen, trying to make out more details. The figure didn't move. It stood there, silently, as though it were waiting for something. The longer I stared at it, the more I felt the weight of its presence. It was as if the figure was aware that I was looking at it, aware of my fear. I couldn't tear my eyes away. I clicked on the next file. The footage shifted to a different angle, this time from a camera positioned near the hallway. It was from the same night. I could see myself walking from the kitchen to the living room, a cup of coffee in my hand. But this time, the shadow was closer. It was unmistakable now. A tall, dark figure, barely visible in the dim light, standing just at the edge of the hallway. My heartbeat raced. It wasn't a mistake. This wasn't just some random glitch. Someone had been in my apartment. Someone had been watching me, and they had been doing it for a long time. I felt a creeping dread crawl up my spine. My eyes darted around the office, half expecting to see someone lurking in the corner, watching me from the shadows. I quickly shut the video, my hands trembling as I reached for the mouse to close the folder. But I couldn't. Something stopped me. A voice inside me whispered, "You have to keep going. You have to know the truth." I hated that voice, but I couldn't ignore it. I clicked on the next file. This time, the video was different. It wasn't just footage from inside my apartment. It was something much worse. It showed the outside of my building. The street was empty, the streetlights casting long, distorted shadows on the pavement. The timestamp read 11:25 p.m., the same night, just hours ago. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. Why would someone film the outside of my building? But then as I watched, the camera slowly panned upward, focusing on my window, my apartment window. It wasn't just a random shot. It was deliberate. The camera zoomed in, focusing on the exact window where I had been sitting just minutes ago. My window, my apartment. I felt my blood run cold. Someone had been watching me from the outside, too, and they were still there. The footage was shaky, as though the person holding the camera was nervous, trying to remain hidden. The camera zoomed in on my window, and I could see my reflection in the glass. It was distorted, but it was there. But then something else caught my eye. A figure was standing just beneath my window, in the shadows. It was hard to make out at first, but as I focused, I saw the silhouette of a person barely visible in the darkness. They were looking directly at my window. At me. I gasped and pulled back on the screen, my heart pounding. Was that person still out there? Was someone standing beneath my window, watching me, waiting for me to do something? I couldn't breathe. My entire body felt numb with fear. I quickly shut the video and tried to clear the folder, but I couldn't. The files were still there, mocking me, daring me to keep going. I clicked on the next one. The next video was different from all the others. It didn't show me at all. Instead, the footage was taken from inside my apartment, but the angle was unfamiliar, The camera was positioned near the door, angled in such a way that it captured the hallway leading to the bedroom. The timestamp read 4:47 a.m. I wasn't in the video, but someone was. A figure, cloaked in darkness, slowly stepped into the frame. The figure was tall and thin, their face obscured by shadows. The person moved with an eerie, unnatural stillness, like a ghost. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up as I watched, my body frozen in place. The figure stepped forward, closer to the camera, until they were almost at the door. And then they stopped. They stood there, right outside the frame, as though they were waiting for something. I clicked the video to stop, but the screen didn't go black. Instead, the figure's hand slowly moved into view, fingers curling around the door handle. The door creaked as it opened, just enough for the figure to slip inside. I sat there, motionless, as the figure stepped into my apartment. And then everything went dark. I sat there, staring at the black screen in complete silence. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, unable to move. I had just seen something unimaginable, something that didn't belong in this world. The figure in the video had entered my apartment. The room felt suffocating, the air heavy with fear. I glanced around the office, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows, but the office was empty, just a hum of computers and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I could no longer pretend this was a glitch or some messed up joke. This was real. Someone had been in my apartment, and they were still there. I had to know who it was, how they had gotten in, and why they were doing this. I quickly opened a new window on my computer and searched for any kind of information that might explain what I had just seen. But the search results only brought more questions. There was nothing that explained these files, this footage, this unexplainable presence in my life. I had to go home. I couldn't stay in the office any longer. I slammed the lid of my laptop shut, grabbed my bag, and headed for the door. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face, and I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. My mind raced with thoughts of what I had just seen. Who could be behind this? And why? I tried to shake it off, telling myself that I had to stay calm, but the thought of someone watching me from the shadows, hiding in my own home, made my skin crawl. The ride home was a blur. The city lights outside seemed to pass in a haze, like I wasn't even part of the world anymore. My mind kept returning to that dark figure in the hallway, stepping closer to my door, their hand reaching for the handle. When I finally arrived at my apartment, I hesitated before unlocking the door. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound of it deafening in my ears. The place felt off. It was too quiet, too still. I stepped inside, glancing around the room. Everything seemed normal. The couch, the coffee table, the scattered papers. Nothing had changed, but something didn't feel right. The silence was oppressive, and every corner of the room seemed to hide a secret. I walked further inside, moving toward the hallway that led to the bedroom. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound, and it seemed out of place. I glanced at my phone to check the time. It was just past 4 a.m., the timestamp from the video. I reached for the light switch, flicking it on. The hallway was bathed in light, but the sense of unease didn't go away. I was still being watched. I could feel it. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out, expecting a notification or message, but there was nothing. No alerts, no missed calls. But as I checked the screen, my heart stopped. There was a new video in my gallery. It was labeled Tonight. I opened it without thinking. The screen flickered to life, and my breath caught in my throat. It was another video from inside my apartment. This time, it was filmed from behind the couch. The camera angle was low, almost as though the person behind the lens was crouching or kneeling. The figure from the videos before was now visible again. And they weren't just standing anymore. The figure was walking slowly toward me, toward the bedroom door. Their movements were unnaturally smooth, as though they didn't have the same limitations as a human being. They moved in silence, their feet barely making a sound as they glided across the floor. The timestamp showed 4:12 a.m., the exact time I had just looked at my phone. The figure paused in the hallway, just outside the bedroom door. It stood there for what felt like an eternity, as if waiting for something. Then the figure raised a hand. It reached toward the door handle. My stomach twisted into knots. I could feel the terror rising in my chest. Was I about to watch myself, my own self, be attacked? But before the figure could turn the handle, the video cut off. The screen went black. I couldn't breathe. I needed to leave. I couldn't stay here. My apartment wasn't safe anymore. It never had been. Someone, something, had been in my life, watching, waiting, for far longer than I had realized. And I had no idea what they wanted. I grabbed my jacket and bolted for the door. I couldn't waste any more time. I didn't even know where I was going, but I had to get out. As I reached for the door handle, a cold voice whispered from behind me, "Where are you going?" I froze, my heart slamming in my chest. I turned around slowly, my body frozen in terror. There, standing in the middle of the living room, was a figure from the videos. It was real. It was standing right in front of me. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching me with those cold, empty eyes. And then, in a voice that sent chills through my bones, it spoke again. "Why did you have to look?" I stood frozen, unable to breathe, unable to move. The figure in front of me was nothing like I had ever seen before. It was tall, its form indistinct, cloaked in an unsettling darkness that seemed to devour the light around it. The edges of its body blurred, as though it were not truly part of this world. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel its gaze drilling into me, cold and relentless. The air grew thicker, suffocating. Every breath felt like it was being stolen from me. My pulse hammered in my ears, and my limbs felt heavy, as if they no longer obeyed my commands. The voice that had whispered to me was now clear in my mind, like a lingering echo. "Why did you have to look?" The words twisted in my head, making no sense, but at the same time, they filled me with dread. What did it mean? Why was it asking me that question? I managed to find my voice, barely a whisper, trembling with fear. "Who are you?" The figure didn't respond right away. Instead, it took a step forward, its movement smooth and unnerving. The closer it came, the colder the room seemed to become, as though all warmth and life were being drained away. "I am what was never meant to be," the figure finally answered, its voice hollow, like the wind howling through an empty, desolate place. "I am the thing that watches, the thing that waits." I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and my mind raced to understand. "What do you want from me?" The figure took another slow step toward me, its presence suffocating. "What you saw was only a glimpse of the truth. You weren't supposed to see it." It tilted its head slightly, as if studying me, before adding, "But now you know. Now you can't unsee it." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The videos, the footage, the figure watching me from the shadows. It wasn't just random. It wasn't just some sick prank. This was something far worse. Something I wasn't prepared for. "Why me?" I whispered, barely able to form the words. Why was I chosen? The figure's shadowy form seemed to expand, filling the room. "You weren't chosen," it said, its voice cold and mocking. "You simply looked. That was all it took. You unlocked the door, and now I'm here." The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in around me. The figure's words were like chains, binding me in place. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. "You!" I choked, my throat tight. "You're what, a ghost? A demon?" The figure let out a sound, almost like a laugh, though it was hollow and unsettling. "I am neither ghost nor demon," it said. "I am something far older, far darker. I have no name, no origin. I simply exist. I have always existed. Watching, waiting." A cold gust of air swept through the room, and the lights flickered as the figure took yet another step closer. "You think you've been alone in this place?" it asked. "You think your life was yours to control? You were never alone. You were never free." I staggered back, my mind spiraling. It felt like the walls were pressing in on me from all sides. "What are you going to do to me?" I asked, my voice trembling. For the first time, the figure seemed to pause, and its form rippled as though it were shifting, its edges becoming sharper, more distinct. "You have seen the truth. Now you must live with it. And for as long as you do, I will be here, watching, waiting. Suddenly, the figure lunged forward, its form stretching, its presence overwhelming. A flash of icy coldness filled the room, and for one horrifying moment, it felt like the world around me was about to collapse. But before I could react, the figure vanished. The air returned to normal. The silence was deafening. I was alone again. For a moment, I stood frozen, unsure of what had just happened. Was it real? Had I imagined the entire thing? My mind screamed at me to run, to escape, but my body refused to move. The room felt just as it had before, but something inside me had shifted. A dark weight pressed on my chest, suffocating me. I stumbled back toward the door, my hand shaking as I reached for the handle. But before I could open it, I heard a sound, a soft, nearly imperceptible whisper, as though the air itself were speaking. "You'll never leave." I froze again, the words sinking into my soul. I spun around, but the figure was gone. I couldn't explain what had just happened. The footage, the figure, the darkness that had swallowed my apartment. It was all too much. I felt trapped in my own home, in my own life, like there was no escape. I had looked, I had seen the truth, and now I was its prisoner. The apartment felt even more suffocating now. The walls seemed to press in closer with every passing second, as if the very space itself was watching me. The floor creaked under my feet, and every noise around me felt amplified, my pulse echoing in the silence. The figure was gone, but its presence still lingered, hanging in the air like a dark cloud. I stumbled toward the door, my hands shaking. I had to leave. I had to get out. But something held me back. Something that whispered to me in the darkest corners of my mind. "You'll never leave." I shook my head, trying to clear the fog. But the words, that voice, it was like it had planted itself deep in my brain. The figure was right. I had seen too much. It was too late for escape. I turned back toward the apartment, looking at the empty space where the figure had stood. There was no sign of it now, no trace of the shadowy figure that had haunted me for what felt like hours. But the unease, the cold, that feeling of being watched, it never left. As I moved deeper into the apartment, I noticed something strange. The hallway that had seemed so familiar now felt alien. The rooms that had once been mine now felt distant, like they no longer belonged to me. I was out of place here. I reached for the lamp beside the couch and flicked the switch. The light flickered on, but the shadow it cast seemed wrong. It stretched unnaturally across the room, like a twisted reflection. I stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. Something was changing. Something was different. I looked at my phone again, desperate to find some rational explanation, anything to ground me in reality. But as I unlocked the screen, the same new video appeared in my gallery. I opened it and my breath caught in my throat. The video wasn't of me. It wasn't of my apartment. It was of the figure. It stood in a dark, empty room, its face still hidden, its body shrouded in darkness. It was staring at the camera, at me. The timestamp showed 4:12 a.m., exactly the time when the first video had started. But this time, it was not from the past. It was now. The figure's lips moved, but no sound came from the video. Then, it tilted its head, as if it had heard my thoughts. "You can't escape," it whispered in the silence of my mind. "You were never meant to be free. I will always be here, watching, waiting." The video ended abruptly. I dropped my phone, my heart racing. I could no longer deny the truth. I had seen something that I was never meant to see. Something ancient. Something that existed beyond the boundaries of reality. I had unlocked the door, and now it was too late to close it. The figure had always been there, watching, waiting for me to look. And now I would never be free. As I stood in the center of the room, the oppressive darkness closing in around me, I understood what had happened. I wasn't just a victim of some unknown force. I had become part of its story. A story that had no end. The truth was that there was no escape. Not from the figure. Not from the darkness. Not from what I had unlocked. I turned slowly, facing the doorway. I didn't know where I would go, but I had to leave. I had to try at least. But the moment I reached for the door handle, I froze. The figure was standing there, in the doorway. It was waiting for me. And now I realized I had never been in control. The last thing I heard, as the door closed behind me, was its voice, clear and final. You can never run away from yourself. And then, nothing.